everyone, welcome to Tutorial Tuesday week 18. I'm Michelle Renee Hyatt and we are continuing with part 2 of our pumpkin pillow. So you may remember my Turning Up Pumpkins pattern, which is my Stash Buster pattern for the month of September, is made with my pumpkin block as well as a setting block. 4 different settings, so really great for stash busting. You use 10 to 11 fabrics that are the same tone. So in my case I used orange because they're pumpkins. This could just as easily be tomatoes or apples or many different squashes. It's up to you what you want to use. So it's available on my website, and what I did is I made an extra block when I made my quilt, which I often do when I'm making something that's a holiday theme or if I'm giving it as a gift, so that I have an extra block that goes into some project that can be washed at the same rate as the quilt, especially if you're giving it to a kid, so that if you have to repair the quilt, guess what, you can steal it from something else. But in this case, it's a holiday theme, and I thought it would be fabulous to have a pillow with my pumpkin quilt. So, last week I took you through putting a border on the front and then also protecting the back with just a piece of fabric. So if you missed that, make sure you watch week 17. And then we also prepared our 2 pieces of backing because we are going to overlay the quilt, or overlay the back, so that we can slip this pillow in and out. You'll need a 16-inch form, and if you need the measurements for last week on putting together the front of the pillow and the back of the pillow, make sure you check week 17. It has all the measurements for you. The block, you'll either need to purchase my Turning Up Pumpkins pattern or have participated in the first Tuesday of the month when I do Stash Buster Tuesday combined with Quilt Block Mania, and you get the block for free that week. Alright, but the quilt is fabulous, so buy the pattern. Alright, so this week we're going to focus on the prairie points as well as putting the prairie points onto the pillow and finishing our pillow. Alright, so you will need, as said last week, 20 4.5-inch squares, which, guess what, my Turning Up Pumpkins block used 4.5-inch squares. Also, if you went ahead and you used the 11 fat quarters instead of the 10 fat quarters, you had plenty of extra orange fabric. So we need 20 squares, 4.5. And what we're going to do is we're going to make ourselves some prairie points. And how you do this, and I'm going to take you over to the iron and show you step by step, but basically we're going to fold it in half like it's a half square triangle, and then we're going to fold it into a quarter square triangle. Alright, so I'm going to take you through that step by step, as well as how did I figure out that I needed 20 of them, because this technique just isn't for this particular pillow. You could use this technique on a table runner, a quilt, a baby quilt. So I'm going to take you through the math on how to figure out, simple, nice and easy, how you figure out how many prairie points you need. Alright, so let's get started. Alright, so our prairie points are folded into 4s basically. So what you want to do is basically just give a little light mist of your best press. Make sure they're flat before you begin, and then we're going to fold them in half. And I'm using about 10 different ones. I used 11 different fabrics in my actual quilt, and so I'm pretty much using them all. I think I was a little short on one because it was a really old piece of fabric and I didn't quite have a fat quarter of it. Alright, so after I have them folded in half, I'm then going to fold them into a quarter, and then again just give them a little hit of steam, which will reactivate that best press here. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead, fold it over. Now you'll notice when you're done folding these, one side will have an opening. I tend to put that opening on one side or the other. It doesn't matter if it's left or right. Just go ahead and stack up your units with that opening all on one side. It'll be important soon. You'll see why. All right, so I'm going to continue pressing these. All right, so you can see I have 2 of 10 fabrics to make up my Prairie Points. Now, you may have different colors depending on the quilt, the pillow that you're applying to, because this technique I'm using on my pillow, but that doesn't mean that you just have to use it on a pillow. It can be used as a quilt, and I actually, in a couple weeks, might be showing you on another project, because this is really, really cute. All right, so whether or not you're using all the same color or you're using different colors, you probably want to organize them a bit based on how they might read. So in other words, I'm putting together, you know, basically this has a lot of white, this is a little busy, this is more of an off tone, as well as these. They came from my stash. So I'm basically pairing them so these 4 may from a distance look the same, these may look the same, and then these are really busy and are definitely going to be noticeable. So I want to space out my placement of my Prairie Points. All right, let's talk about how I figured out how many Prairie Points I needed and how to go about doing that math. So I'm going to keep it really simple for you. A very standard size for Prairie Points are 4.5, which is what I started with. All right, you could make them smaller if you wanted to, if you didn't want them to stick out as far. Prairie Points can go in towards a quilt, right, in a border, or they could be sticking out. I'm going to stick mine out because I think it's really going to be cute on a pillow. So I'm going to walk you through that technique. All right, so what happens is a 4.5, when it's folded and you figure out your 1/4 inch seam, you will notice that it ends up being 4 inches. Okay, so 4 inches is going to be exposed. The other thing with Prairie Points is you want to, for them to look good, you want them to overlap at least 1/2 inch. I happen to like them a little bit better, more than that overlapped, which is why we always have like an open side here. So I know I have 16.5, right, on each side. So if I divide that by 4, I know I need at least 4, and that's if they were end to end. So since I need an overlap, I'm going to add 1. And that's typically how I do the math for all of them. I typically say for every 4 you're going to need, so in other words, say your quilt that you're using is 36, right? 36 by 36, or let's go 40 by 40, a typical baby size quilt. So a baby quilt is often 40 by 40. You divide that by 4 and you get 10. Now you would need 10 if they didn't overlap. And my rule of thumb is for every 4 or 5, add 1, right? So since I need 10, I'm probably going to add 2 or potentially 3, depending on how I like how they look. All right? So that's how you go about the math. So I needed technically 4 for each side, adding 1. I need 5 for each side. 5 times 4 is 20, and that's how I came up with the 20. All right, so I grouped these earlier by sort of how they read, and my thought was that I would take, you know, every other, you know, go here, 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 when I'm laying them out, if that makes any sense. All right, and I'm going to work my way backwards because they have to go into each other. So let me see here. I'm just going to overlap this for a second. So here, right, because this is going to come to this corner. So I'm going to go ahead and stick in my pin. And I'm putting these on my pillow, right? All right. So next, I'm going to take this guy who's going to read slightly different. And I'm putting the non-open side in there. All right, and I'm just gonna lay them all first, this side. I only pinned the end. All right, then 3 or 4, and then this would be my 5th one for this side. All right, and I'm going to just pin this here to keep it there for now. And what I basically want to do is space these out. Since I have 5, this middle one should be lined up with the middle of my block, right? So that makes it nice and easy. And so where this overlaps, I'm going to go ahead and throw a pin in. You could also use your Wonder Clips because this is getting a little bunchy right now. All right. Does that make sense? And I'm going to go ahead and do this one. All right. And this one. And what I like to do is some people immediately go and put this on the back, all right, and use that for stitching. What I like to do is to put a scant 1/4 inch across this, do this side, then do this side, then this side, then this side. And then I'll put my backing on with a true 1/4 inch. All right, let me take you over to the machine and walk you through this. All right, so I came over to my machine and I moved my needle over. All right, so again, I have what's called a perfect foot that allows me to move my needle inside that little 1/4 inch hole. And so I can go ahead and give myself a scant 1/4 inch. All right, so I'm going to start at the top here. If you have, if you don't have a pfaff, you may need, or a machine that has dual technology, you may need a leader to start this. All right, just because it is a little bulky. You may want to put a walking foot on if you have one. Again, this has a built-in walking foot. So I'm going to go ahead. I'm making sure that my edges are touching, the edges of my Prairie Point are touching the edge of my pillow top. All right, and I'm just coming through with about a little bigger than 1/8 of an inch seam just to hold these nice in place. All right, I'm going to go ahead. Be careful when you get to a new one. All right, making sure these are laying nice and flat. Make sure you get all of them down. I just find this easier than putting that other side on first, because how am I to know if these move or not, right? So I want to make sure. Sorry, that got a little undone there. I want to make sure I can see them before I cover them up again. All right, nice and easy. Like I said, you could try this with Wonder Clips as well. I just find, you know, my long pins work really well. All right, I'm just going to make sure this is nice and flat. You can use a stiletto as well, that might help. And we're just coming across. All right, I'm going to go back to the cutting table and go ahead and line up my other side. But you can see they really look to dot, don't they? All right. All right, I'm going to continue on my journey here. So I haven't done anything here. I just cut off my little leader. These should be butting right up against each other on that corner. And again, I'm going to throw in a pin there. And then If you want, you can just kind of lay these out right in the order that they're gonna go. All right, and then I can pin this one here. And then my goal is to get these staggered in between, right? Spaced. You could get into measuring them and such, right? There's nothing wrong with that. I just usually, whenever possible, something this small, I'm just really looking to make sure that this middle point hits my middle of my block. So I know that's good. And then I'm really just eyeballing it to make sure these are overlapped about the same and that these are overlapped about the same. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and pin them. Look at me, right hand pinning. Just because of the way I set this up for you all to see, but you get the idea. All right. And that one is the one I want to make sure is in there, the middle of that block. Just going to turn this so it's a little easier for me to pin. Right, nice and neat. I am going to pin the middle just to make sure, because I'd rather pin it once and have to unstitch it. That guy, the back is out a little. Just gonna kind of futz with it, right? This is, no one's gonna, well, I shouldn't say nobody. I'm not gonna run up to it and see if you are exact or not. All right, so I'm just gonna sticking a pin in here to keep these a little more stable. They're just moving around a little bit more than my liking. All right, so I'm going to go back and stitch this the same way I did this one here. All right, back at the machine, I'm going to do exactly the same. I'm just going to show you one more time. I promise I won't torture you with both the other two sides. Again, you might need a leader if you're not using something with dual technology. Walking foot might be a way to go here. You kind of have numerous layers. All right, just making sure they're nice and lined up. Use your nail or a stiletto. Coming through. Just putting down a little bit more than 1/8 of an inch to keep them nice and secure. And get better each side. Don't stress. Like I said, if they move a little bit, it's no big deal. No one is going to look at it to that degree. See, even there, I have to kind of put that. All right, I'm coming down to that corner where those are butted up against each other. I'm just going to go right on through. All right, so I'm going to go back and finish the other two sides. All right, so I've put the Prairie Points on all 4 sides. All right, I'm just doing a little trimming. All right. So now is time to put my backing on my pillow. All right, now I have fabric that is a bit directional, although It's probably actually pretty good, but we shall see. Who's really going to look at the back of our pillow? But if you did, you would want to pay attention to your direction, right? So I have my flowers going up, and I have my finished sides outside, right, when I'm laying it out. Let me just scoot a bit, right, so you can kind of see it. Let me scoot a little more. I'm right up against this camera pole, so sorry. All right, so I have my finished edges that I did last week there, and I'm going to flip it over and flip it over. All right, so I want to make sure that I have my overlap here, so you can see my 2 inches in each direction. And now I'm going to pin this up against the edge, and I'm just going to sew completely around with a good 1/4 inch, right? So that'll be in from the seam that I've put through already. That was basically about 1/8 of an inch. All right, so I like to pin the 2 sides that are not overlapping first. And again, you could use Wonder Clips for this, or highly recommend the large pins that I use all the time. All right, and I'm going to pin this because it is really thick. So I'm taking a nice big chunk here when I'm pinning this. And I'm going to get these nice and stable first, right? You see, I don't know how anybody does it with showing the prairie point, with the hiding the prairie points inside in one step. I'd just be so afraid everything's going to move on me, and I wouldn't be able to see it. So at least I know these are all tacked down, and I don't, oh, that pin is bent. All right. It's probably the one I stepped on. And yes, it was painful. I put my flip-flops back on. I tend to sew with my bare feet, but that's not always good when you sometimes drop pins out of your wrist. All right. See, there is a lot of fabric. So definitely if you aren't using something with dual foot technology, such as the pfaff, I think Husqvarna and now Bernina have it as well. Something similar, not that exact name. You're going to want to put a walking foot on for sure for this. All right, so now I have my 2 sides securely pinned. If you want to, you could by all means go ahead and stitch that, but I'm just going to pet it out, right? So make sure I'm flattening it. You could give it a good iron too if you wanted to. All right, so I'm taking care of the part that's not doubled up with my backing first, making sure that is nice and smooth. All right, and now I'm going to pin my overlap. So I want the edges. I'm going to put a nice pin in there. Again, I'm grabbing a good amount because I have a lot of thickness here. And I'm going to throw one in the middle of that overlap. All right, I'm going to do the same with the other side. All right, so I'm going to pin out this first. All right, the single layer. Well, the single layer of back. We have tons of layers here. All right. Right up to there. All right, now I have the last of this double. So I'm going to make sure that is, I'm catching all the ends. And then one there in the middle. All right, so now I'm going to go stitch this. All right, I'm going to start this where I'm doubled up, where I have the seam. I want to make sure that that is tacked down first. I know I have, you know, 2 more sides to go until I get to here, but at least I know this side is nice and tight. So sort of like when I put binding on a quilt, I don't start at a corner, right? I start in the center. So I'm going to come in here. I've put my machine back to a true 1/4 inch. I'm going to put my needle down. Again, you may need a walking foot if you don't have the dual technology. All right. And I'm going to come through. I'm going to go back a few steps, come forward a few steps, stitches I should say, and make sure that is nice and tight. Nice and stitched down. I have my pins all the way to the edge, so I'm going to remove them before I get to them. Right? We don't want to mess up the timing of our machine. But if you pin lefty, you can pull them out right before. If you're a righty and you're struggling, remember you can just pull it back with your thumb. Right, going around. Now my foot here has a 1/4 inch indicator, so I know when I'm a 1/4 inch from that corner, when my fabric hits that. If you wanted to, by all means you could come all the way through, but I'm going to, since I know where my 1/4 inch is, I'm just going to hover and go ahead and do my turn my corner. All right, move those pins. Easy peasy, right? Oh, I love my pfaff. It is literally going through so many layers right now. And it is just flying. I love it. A lot of people ask me how I got started sewing on a pfaff. My grandmother always sewed on a pfaff. And my high school graduation present was a pfaff. I was thrilled. Alright, so I'm going up to a 1/4 inch. Making my turn. Coming back through. Right. Coming through. It is just cooking. Love it. Alright, we're almost there. Again, I'm going to come all the way in to a 1/4. Do my turn. Come on through. Watch your clothes with these pins. Watch your fingers. Again, I think if your machine's struggling, check the pressure as well as consider a walking foot. Because there are, 4, 5, 6, 7. We're going through 7 layers. And that's if you didn't do batting. Can you see now why I didn't do batting? Alright. There we go. Alright, I'm in the home stretch. Home stretch. That last corner. Coming up. And I am going to go all the way past to do that second of that doubled up layer of the backing. All right, so I'm coming in, and I'm going to go right on through, and then I'm doing my final knotted stitch. All right, now if you are giving this to a child, if you're doing a utility one and it's going to be used as a pillow, you should think about coming through and doing either like a zigzag or a closed knit stitch to get these raw edges. If you're just using it as a holiday pillow, it more than likely will not get washed, and you're fine leaving it with the raw edges. Alright, so I came over to my ironing board and I'm going to turn this inside out. Now, you may want to nip these corners and just go you want to be careful not to get your corner thread, but to just trim them just back a little bit. So I'm going in about 1/8 of an inch from my corner. Alright. And that will help you turn your corners. You can use a stiletto that's not real pointy, like that purple thing, or there's a lot of turners out there. I have a plastic bone one somewhere. All right, so I just nipped those, and I'm going to turn this inside out. Inside out? I think that is what it is. All right, and then grab the other one. How to done. All right, and then you want to just take whatever you have that you're using and get that corner completely out. All right, so it takes a little poking. Don't do anything sharp. All right. And just be careful not to pull on your prairie points, thinking that, I guess it will help you get them out, but, you would take some care. All right, so this purple thing, it just pops it right out. Now, it's plastic, so I don't want to use that in there when ironing. All right, and this really doesn't need much ironing. You'll see that they'll naturally pop out. Right? I just usually give a little steam to it. Sorry if that steamed up the camera. Alright. I just tug them a bit to get them out. But your pillow form is going to be pretty tight. So it should get them. All right, let's turn this baby over. How cute is this, right? Even if you weren't doing a pillow, if you were just doing a wall hanging. It's a really cute technique. All right, now some people go ahead and seal this off, but there's no raw edges, so I do not. I just keep it as it was sewn on, but again, it's all a matter of preference. But let me go stuff my pillow in it and show you the final product. All right, so now we're ready to put our pillow in it. We have this 2-inch overlap in the back, remember? So I'm going to just put the one side in first. Be careful, right? You don't want to rip out your stitches. Get it in there, and then just kind of squish the pillow. Don't pull on the fabric too much. All right. My little tag. You can take that tag off if you want it. All right. Now I had them squished over to that other side, so I'm just gonna futz with it a bit. But you can see just that 2-inch overlap because it's so nice and taut. I think some people go, oh, you have to put a button in the back. You don't really if you make it so that it's, you know, the size of the pillow. If you go too big on the pillow size. All right, and I just took this out of the packaging today, so it does take about 2 days for the fill to kind of find itself. Fill out a little bit more. All right, so there you have it, my little pillow. All right, everyone, that is it for this week. Thank you for joining me for week 18. It was a 2-part series between 17 and 18, and we made this fabulous pumpkin pillow. You can use this pattern basically and adapt it for any 12-inch, or I could even go 14-inch and go with a thinner border. But it's basically a block. We added border. We made our overlapped back, and then we did our prairie points. So it came up. It's really, really cute. Uses up that leftover fabric. It's a great option for if you're making a kid's quilt and you want to make a matching pillow. It lets you use up that fabric that you may have left over, and if you tell the mom or the dad that when they do the wash they should throw this in with it, so that if you need to, you have tons of fabric here to repair that quilt. But I love using it for holiday quilts, and I make a matching holiday pillow. So I used my Turning Up Pumpkins pattern, which is my stash buster that just came out at the beginning of September. And I just made an extra pumpkin block and used my leftover background. I had a leftover stem block, and then I used up the border fabric for my backing. And I used up the background for the sides, and then my prairie points were made with extra fabric that I had. I cut my 4.5-inch squares. So if you need the measurements, make sure you go back to the beginning of week 17, and I take you through everything you need to make this. If you're looking for the pillow form, I have some on my website, so make sure you check them out. I always love when you support me for putting these videos together, so thank you very much. Tune in for week 19, which is going to be another exciting project.